I'd like to thank everybody for coming to the Planning Committee meeting today, and we'll get straight off with the business. Just to tell you that this has been live streamed and recorded, so be careful what you say, how you say it. Thank you very much. Okay. Item 2, it's emergency procedure. If the alarm does ring, would everybody leave through the double doors and then the first double doors on your right hand side and congregate on the grass in the front of the building? Thank you very much. Item 3, apologies for absence.
I've got Christine Robertson, Jim Bailey, Anna Bronican, Michelle Donoghue Moncrief.
Thank you. George.
Yes, I've got to leave in about an hour's time because I'm going with a couple of colleagues to the launch of the Coast to Coast in
Right, thank you, George. Okay. Item 4, it's public minutes for the meeting held on the 5th of February. Everybody read it? All in favour? Right, thank you very much. Number 5 is public question time. Have we any public questions? None received. Okay. Okay, we'll go on to agenda item 6. Members are reminded it is their responsibility to declare any nature of any personal, prejudicial or disclosable interest relating to any item immediately prior to the consideration. And would they then fill the forms in? Thank you very much. Yes, George.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to declare predetermination with respect to the first planning application. This is something that is happening within the division that I represent. It is a project that I supported from the beginning because of the numerous benefits that it brings to the community. And therefore, when we are considering that item on the agenda, I would be leaving the room and not take any part.
Right, thank you, George. Thank you. Right, we'll go on to agenda item 7, which is miscellaneous items. Chris.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. The miscellaneous items are, as always, members' updates on enforcement appeals, planning appeals, a list of planning applications determined under delegated powers, and a list of enforcement matters as well, and progress on those. We always have a look at the appeals. It's important to note what inspectors have said in their decisions and whether we can learn any lessons from that, or indeed contact the planning inspectorate as we have done in the past. So in this case, there are 3 appeals that have been lodged, and they'll be determined in due course. And we have decisions of 3 as well, just to briefly go through, and we've just got the slides for those as well. They were all dismissed, so in favour of the authority's decision, which I think is really important in terms of an independent measure of the authority's quality of decision making. And local planning authorities aim to get 66% of decisions determined in accordance with their decision. I think our rate is heading towards upper 70%, so we're doing very well this year, but not to be taken for granted. So in terms of just talking you through them, can we have the full screen? So the first one relates to a property called Beacon Farm, and it was against a refusal to comply with the condition on a permission that was granted to convert that farm building to holiday units and residential annex. The condition that was obviously causing problems for the applicant was that all new external doors, door frames and windows had to be of timber construction. That's a standard condition the authority puts on barn conversions. And I think the inspector going along with this, it's really an important marker for us that helps us with our approach to the use of plastic windows, which in terms of appearance, I think everybody will agree are improving as the technology gets better. But as you can see, obviously, on this agenda as well, there are occasions and situations where the authority feels that plastic windows are appropriate, and conversely, situations where they're not. And this is one of them where, as I've said, we try to resist non-traditional materials on barn conversions. And that's important to maintain the quality of the agricultural heritage in the national park, and the national park stock of vernacular farm buildings, which a conversion should be supportive of and maintain that quality. So that was the building, lovely traditional barn. And in barn conversions, we always seek to make sure that the changes, external changes, are minimal, using existing openings. Try and reduce numbers of things like roof lights, so you keep that wall to void ratio that's important in terms of saying that immediately is an agricultural building, not a residential building, and that's what the conversions are seeking to maintain. I think that is an example of the proposed plastic frames. It's not on this building, it was an example from elsewhere. And we did talk about this one as officers, whether this was strong enough for us to actually resist. And what really I think swayed us was the fact that we've actually put that condition on. So why would we just agree to lifting it without challenging it? So I think in terms of the inspector's views, things that come out from that report for me is that the inspector acknowledged that views of that site, public views of that site, were relatively limited, and he also noted that the approach to fenestration on that farm complex was inconsistent with the farmhouse actually having plastic windows through permitted development. But nevertheless, the inspector concluded that the proposed windows would be noticeably different to timber, mostly due to the massing, and this is coming straight from the report. It's called about the massing of the plastic elements compared to the glazed areas. So it's basically saying the proportions of the frames and the bars to the glazed areas would be different in a plastic window. The definitive sentence for me was in paragraph 6, where they state the use of traditional materials is fundamental to achieving a sensitive scheme conserving the character and appearance of the existing buildings. So fundamentally, conversion policies are about conserving an important heritage, and that is also part of our first purpose. It's not principally about delivering new housing. So we do have a different approach to barn conversions, where we're quite restrictive in what the materials should be and what the design should be. And it's great that the inspector has upheld that approach. So that's a sort of marker for our continuing approach to say traditional materials must be used on barn conversions. So that was the first one. The second one relates to a really important hotel in Robin Hood's Bay. You'll be aware of this one, members, at the top of Robin Hood's Bay, very distinctive, very prominent late Victorian building. It's not listed. It lies outside the conservation area, although there is a proposed extension to Robin Hood's conservation area, which we've not followed through yet, which seeks to actually include all the top buildings for their lovely Edwardian and Victorian architecture. But nevertheless, the hotel is considered to be a non-designated heritage asset, and that's an important thing because that's recognised in national planning policy. The inspector agreed with that. Just as a sort of context, the authority has been really supportive of previous development proposals at this hotel, approving an orangery, quite a large structure. You see it there on the south-facing aspect of the building to help with their wedding venue business. Also, members might remember relatively recently proposal to upgrade that front garden with glass balustrades and extended patio. That was actually retrospective and did receive complaints from local residents, but that was approved as well. But this scheme, we feel, just went too far. It involved significant development on the other side of the hotel, which not only was bulky, it was going to result in overlooking of the neighbouring property, but it was just of a really poor, bland, residential sort of design that we felt was not in keeping with the really grand Victorian architecture of the hotel. So that was the proposed extension above an existing bar. It also involved the removal of what we thought was quite a nice old stables building at the back. So that's the proposal from the rear, quite a large, massive new building, and that's the other aspect of it. And this was going to be in place of, I think we've got a photo of it. So that's the road frontage. So the extension would be a second story extension over here. And it would involve the loss of this as well, which we think, well, again, not listed, not in a conservation area, but the traditional original stable block for the hotel, and nevertheless an important part of Robin Hood Bay's history and character. So we resisted the loss of that. So we were really pleased the inspector went along with this and concluded that the loss of part of a non-designated heritage asset harm to the character and appearance of the existing building, and also they did accept there was unacceptable impact on the outlook and living conditions of the neighbouring property. But the first two issues, the harm to heritage and conservation interests, the inspectors used those words. I've given great weight to these, and has also linked them with the first statutory national park purpose. So I think that gives national park authorities additional strength to actually be as high quality as they can and resist loss of cultural heritage, because it's embodied in our first purpose as well. The inspector again has also, on this one and the next one, explicitly stated that they are under the legal requirement to seek to further the purposes of national parks. So that's the strengthened landscape protection duty under the Lower Act 2023. And I think the fact that they've actually rehearsing that in their workings out is really good. We have actually been in touch with PINS a lot about this, trying to help them understand what that duty is about in planning decisions, and it's really good. And I think that it is having an impact potentially on some of these decisions. So just finally and briefly, the last one, completely different scale. This is about a porch. And goodness knows, I don't think we've refused many porches, but this is a sensitive part of Hamsley Conservation Area at the top of the High Street. Permission was given for a lightweight, narrow porch with open walls. That permission was being implemented incorrectly to have a different proportion porch, wider, which affected the roof slope as well. And you could have said, well, is that really important, that difference? We did resist it, the retrospective application, and the inspector has agreed that details matter, and this does adversely impact. The test being that does not conserve and enhance the conservation area. So again, this just gives weight to the importance of a designated conservation area. And again, the inspectors also related to the need to uphold the first purpose, giving great weight to the NPPF policy on national parks, and also referring to the strengthened landscape protection duty as well. So that's the sort of recognition that inspectors have even taken on board that legal requirement on small scale development like porches. So that's the three, and that's a photograph of the porch in construction, which is the wider proportions than what was approved. So again, it illustrates that the authority works with applicants, gets a good scheme, gets an approval, and then if they don't follow that, we will follow on. Otherwise, there's not much point in the planning system. Thank you, Chair.
Questions? Yes.
Thanks, Chair. I'm really pleased that we learn each time that we learn from the decisions that have been made and appeals, and it is really interesting to see the duty of the protected landscape coming through. I'm just interested, Chair, on these three appeals. Did the applicant get pre-application advice? The reason for my question, so it's very transparent, is it would be hard to see why what has happened if they'd already taken advice from me. Or is this what we are learning and that we can then give that advice in the future? That's.
The first one for the windows, there was no pre-app advice. For the Victoria Hotel, I think there might have been a week were negative.
Yes.
And for the porch, obviously they had their plan permission. We only got involved through enforcement because they started building something that they didn't have permission for.
Thank you. Thank you
So
very much.
two of those, Janet, wouldn't have been relevant because, again, the first one was a permission we'd given. They just didn't like one of the conditions, so they didn't come and ask us about that. And likewise with the porch. There was another learning point that I omitted, which was on the Victoria Hotel. I think we raised concerns about light pollution from the additional glazing. The inspector's not gone with that. Basically saying there needs more evidence that light pollution from internal lights coming out of windows is really a problem, and I think that's a really important one for us to go back and talk to our dark night sky officers about. And I know the other Dark Night Sky reserves, Nidderdale and the Yorkshire Dales, are struggling with things like conservatories. And you can't really just refuse a conservatory just because there's a lot of glazing, as opposed to external lights where you do get very, very direct light glow. So that's something that we need to think a little bit more about, light pollution from internal sources. Thanks, Chair.
Any other questions? No. Okay, thank you, Chris. Right, we'll go on to item 8, which is the planning applications. And application 1 is siting of a additional silo, 1 additional storage, secured storage unit. This is for the flower belt at Helmsley, and it's Hilary.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to leave the room now.
Thanks, Chair. Morning, members. So members may recall this site from an application that came before members last year, which was an application for farm diversification enterprise, which was originally granted a 10-year permission, which expires in February 2035. The site is located in the open countryside halfway between Helmsley and Sproxton, and the permission that was granted last year allows an enhanced pick your own enterprise, which includes associated structures to provide cafe bar facilities and space for wrapping flowers and taking payments for those purchases. And we have a revised application for additional structures, but we have a speaker, Chair.
Right, thank you. Yes, we've got one speaker, and it's the applicant agent, and it's Henry Wainwright. Henry, you have 3 minutes when you start speaking. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. I'd like to begin by telling you a little bit about myself. My name is Henry Wainwright. I'm a third generational farmer from Sproxton. I've lived in the area all my life. I attended Rydell School and I'm currently the chairman of Helmsley Young Farmers. The flower belt began 4 years ago when I returned home from agricultural college. At the time, the farm needed a sustainable, innovative diversification project, something that would help secure its future and allow me to be part of the family business, which I'm deeply passionate about. Our aims were simple: to create something unique for the area that everyone could enjoy, and something that would showcase the incredible views we're so lucky to have across the North Yorkshire moors. Since then, the flower belt has grown to be a valued part of the local community. This year in particular, we've welcomed visitors from across the UK, especially come to visit us, many of whom go on to then explore the wider national park. We are also passionate about supporting local. We source as much local produce as possible, much of it coming from Helmsley itself. The footpath linking us to Helmsley has proved a huge success and been appreciated by both locals and visitors alike. Having read through the comments submitted in support of our application, one thing is very clear: there was an overwhelming backing for what we do. What stood out the most for me was the sheer volume of support from local residents, but also from people that have travelled afar. It highlighted the wider appeal we bring and the positive impact it has on the whole area. If you stand in Helmsley Marketplace, it won't be long until you find one of our bouquets of flowers being carried around town, and this is something we're really proud of. So the plans we present today are genuinely needed. Last year we really struggled to accommodate our customers, and our staff were working in very limited conditions. Over the summer we employed 27 people, with up to 18 people working a day, and this was out of 1 shipping container and 1 silo, so it was a bit of a struggle to say the least. The proposal will allow us to address these challenges we have, creating a more practical and welcoming space that blends in sensitivity, it's a bit of that, you know what I mean, into its surroundings, while improving the experience for both staff and our visitors. So with your support, we can continue to benefit with our local employment and warmly welcome visitors to Helmsley and the wider national park. Thank you very much for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Henry. Okay, back to Hilary.
So the original permission was, as I say, for a 10-year temporary period from a temporary period each year, so from April until November, so over the summer months to take in sort of the spring flower picking season, the summer, and then the autumn for pumpkins. So the original approved structures, sort of in association with this business, was one silo, which was the space for handing out jars and taking payments for flowers, and then the steel container, which has got cafe facilities in it. It's got a coffee machine and a pizza oven, and then the stretch tents to provide a covered seating area, and then access to the site from an existing field gate on the road down into Helmsley. So whilst the original proposal was considered contrary to our rural diversification and tourism policies contained in the local plan, because of its open countryside location and away from an established farmstead, it was considered at the time that this a temporary use over the summer months was acceptable because of the clear wider economic benefits to local businesses and Helmsley's wider economy, which was sort of demonstrated with the support that was received in relation to the application, not just from customers to the flower belt, but also from many of the businesses within Helmsley whose produce is sold on site and who also benefit from footfall into Helmsley because of the footpath down into the town. However, following that permission last year, when the facility opened again this last summer, additional structures were placed on site. Additionally, there were 2 extra silos, as well as sort of the additional sort of stretch tents. One of the silos was then removed during the summer period. So this application is for the 2 silos here. This one has now been removed. So in terms of the sort of justification put forward for these additional facilities, as explained by Henry Wainwright just now, just the use of one silo for where visitors go pick up their vases or their jars to go and pick flowers, they then have to go back to make payments and to have their flowers wrapped. There just wasn't enough space within one unit. So it's felt that having the two silo units here pushed over to the far side of the site, so not so intrusive from the roadside, would allow a better space for staff and for visitors in terms of picking up vases and making payments for their purchases. So part of the proposal is the retention of these 2 silos in this location, again for the summer season only, so coming on site in April, being removed end of October, beginning of November. Commissions also sought for, so it's just a closer image of the inside of the silos. Commissions also sought for additional stretch tents carrying on sort of further behind that, and then also an extension to the steel container. The container itself is clad in dark timber, which was a proviso of the original permission, so it's less visually intrusive. So the proposal is to have a second container here and the stretch tent again carrying over to this side. So from the road side, it's to the far side of what you see from public vantage points. So the reasons for these proposals are to allow provision of an additional pizza oven because of the demand they have for sort of the cafe facilities when people are visiting for the flower picking. And also they've started selling sort of ice cream from one of the local ice cream providers, so they want space within here for selling ice creams. And then also sort of making advantage of the facilities provided. There have also been additional activities during the day and in the evenings for things like sort of outdoor yoga classes, young farmers meetings, sort of able to take place in this location, benefiting from the sort of tranquility and the visual amenities for things such as yoga. So those are the justification put forward in relation to these proposals. In terms of policy, so again, sorry, this is just the sort of timber-clad coffee and pizza oven facility, which would be extended in length and storage area at the back. In terms of our local plan policies, this development is still contrary to our spatial policies. It's contrary to our tourism policies and our rural diversification policies because of its open countryside location where there was previously no development other than an agricultural field, so there's no built structures on here. The original reason for approval, as I say, was because there were clearly significant economic benefits to the locality and there was a lot of local support. So whilst this additional development is still contrary to policy, it's felt that if it's still just for that temporary April to November period, it's continuing to provide those facilities that we felt were acceptable in the first instance. The visual harm for a short period of time is still outweighed by those wider benefits. You'll see from the application report the significant amount of letters of support that we've received in relation to this application. Partly, I would say, because there was a plea on Facebook for those comments, but clearly people have felt strongly enough to write in, and local businesses still supporting this scheme. However, the structures are considered to be sort of, to some extent, that's just a shot from the evening. So in terms of dark skies, there is a condition on the approval that nothing other than sort of the fairy lights, there's no other external lighting, and it's not felt that causes sort of wider light spread. But as I say, in terms of the overall development, there is some concern that the focus of this is moving away from the original development, which was very much the flower picking, pumpkin picking, to that being perhaps ancillary to the cafe facilities and the other facilities provided on site. However, it's felt that the addition of the one silo and the extra storage container are not so visually harmful in the long term, particularly if they are moved from site in the winter months, to justify a recommendation for refusal. However, it is felt that this really is the limit of what would be acceptable on this site. We wouldn't want to see further built development on here because it will gradually become very visually intrusive, and the balance between the economic benefits and the visual harm would change. But on the basis of what's before us today, officers are recommending approval. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Hilary. Members, questions? Janet.
Thank you, Henry, and thank you, Hilary. So I think that's the important point at the end, that the objective is still the same, and we've already made that decision. So there we are. It is a shame, though, that wasn't thought about in the first place. It's a shame that we didn't have an idea of the scale, because from a business model, you would have assumed that you knew how much you needed to do. So it's always a little awkward to come back and ask for more, isn't it? But nevertheless, it is a success. It's got a lot of support, and it's needed it helps our economy, and so from that point of view, I think we have made we are being asked to make the right decision in approval, but stressing that this is at the max of what we could tolerate, as Hilary said. Thank you very much.
Thank you. David Jeffels.
I fought hard when this application first came before us, against quite a lot of opposition, really, within the committee. I think it has been a success, and quite frankly, I'm going to give it my wholehearted.
Thank you, David. Malcolm.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I'm a little bit concerned about this. I mean, I think it's unfortunate for all of us, isn't it, when an applicant decides to do something and then come in retrospectively for permission. for it. It really would be better if they had discussions with our officers beforehand, and this is kind of the second time this has happened. I mean, I agree with David that diversification is important. On the other hand, as Hilary pointed out, this is, and the original one was contrary to the policy. And there's a lot of activity going on here, contrary to policy. And I'm not sure to what extent some of that activity is consistent with the development of Helmsley. It seems to me that quite a lot of the activity could take place in Helmsley in any case. You know, is this really a place to encourage, you know, groups to meet and yoga to take place? So the question in my mind is where will it stop? And is this too much, given that all those buildings have to be removed every year? I'd be interested in just what other members say about it. I hear to have supported it. So I just want to say I'm a little concerned. That's where I am at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Malcolm. Jane.
Thank you very much. I just want to have a couple of things, please. Hilary, can you just confirm with me? Last summer you said that they had permission for one silo, did they? And how many silos were on site? Was it 2 and...
At one point there were 3.
Okay, so what's the now? Because presumably now there should be nothing.
I'm not sure. I think one might be tucked over the hill and not actually removed from the site, but there's none in that location at the moment, and certainly over the summer period there were just 2.
Okay, because when I drove past on Sunday, I wasn't really realising this was in. I hadn't read my papers yet. I definitely saw a silo in the field.
Well, I think they're now setting up for this season, because I think from the end of, I think from the 25th of March they can set up for this summer season. So
okay,
it might
have been before the
back on
25th.
site
Right,
for
okay.
this season.
Okay, and so what the thing is to go from 1 to 2 silos. Okay. Can I then just follow that on? When I was driving across, because my gut feeling is that I want to support, I have come from farming backgrounds, we want to support diversity. But just one thing, from the road, I noticed these silos, which when you're looking across onto the moors, I'm going to be nitpicky. Is there any chance that they can be lowered? Because when you go past, you really do notice them. Or is there any chance that instead of giving a second silo, can we give another wooden thing that can be lifted up and taken away, and perhaps more easily if the silos are just shoved to the side and not taken away? I'm just wanting to see if there's an alternative way that we can support, but also make sure that the visual for people on the road is not so obvious, because I didn't know this and I was thinking, gosh, that's a bit scruffy. And then I saw this and I was just wondering, is there anything that could be done to support both the farming business and perhaps to reduce the contrary to our policies? Sorry, but is that a question or a... sorry.
In terms of the height, we did have a discussion, but it didn't really come to anything. That I think potentially you could take sort of the bottom metre off, because it's built in strips. I don't know whether that's something that is achievable. They can actually be removed from site, and I think some of them have been. They got sort of I've seen them be taken away, so they are entirely removable, and potentially they could be. As you can see, there's a sort of a seam there, so I don't know how easy it is to take a bottom section off, which would certainly reduce their visual intrusion. But they are just sat on the ground, so they are completely removable. Can't be taken away from the site.
That's on a hard standing.
Yeah.
Yeah, Chair, I think you've got to be clear that this authority's already approved one of those, so you can't do anything about the height of that. So what you're talking about, losing 3 feet off one of those, that's
going to make minimal difference.
That's not going to make the difference. It's basically, you've got one silo there, is to the tipping point in terms of visual impact. Officers don't think so. The fact that you can see this from the road is one thing, but no one's actually said about what it's like from the other side of Helmsley. on the Highland, looking back on all the public roads and public rights of way there. This site is incredibly prominent, which is why it gives fantastic views. But it also is very visible in the views from what it's looking at. So if you go Carlton Lane and up there, you look back and there's a high plateau above Helmsley, and this is really prominent, albeit it's got a backdrop of woodland behind it. So we've got to be really, really careful about not overdeveloping this site to the extent where it's really going to be significant in that setting of Helmsley. And I'm saying from the national park, not from the entrance to the national park. So officers have sort of said, well, yeah, the authority's given permission for this use. This application is just about adding a little bit more operational development to that use. So you've got to assess whether that in itself, that additional tent and silo, is something that you're going to resist and then fight at appeal, and we're suggesting not. But I do feel that it's unfortunate that we've never sat down with the applicants, they've never come to us for pre-app advice to actually tell us what is they want there in the long term. And you see sites like this having this development creep year after year after year. And we just, I think, need to give a message that this is at the tipping point of being farm diversification into something else. You don't need to go there to have yoga classes or meetings, business meetings. You do that in a town, in a settlement. You go there to have the public take part in an agricultural activity, which is picking flowers, etc. And while they're there, there's an ancillary to help the business and to also improve the enjoyment of visitors, to have some refreshment while they're there. That's it. This cannot become something else by development still, because it's about spatial planning. Yes, we've acknowledged this is contrary to our policies, so we've given the planning balance in terms of the strong link with businesses in Helmsley and the link with visitors and tourism that have overweighed that conflict with policy. But David, a show of hands in itself is not a material consideration. It's what they say that's important. You don't approve something because a lot of people support it. That's not a material consideration. So members, in summary, we're just basically saying this is on the edge of the tipping point of farm diversification into something else. And if it is something else that's in the minds of the applicant, they need to come and talk to us really, and not do this every year. But we feel that this is, in terms of what we've approved, just about acceptable. Thanks.
Thank you, Chris. Colin.
Yes, Chair. I was a wee bit concerned really, because initially last year, did it come in as retrospective? Which they were told at that time, this does not happen again, you know, but here we are, the same situation, a retrospective planning permission that's come in, and really it's not good enough. And on that, you know, I feel as much as anything, you know, I should vote against it, purely on the grounds that 2 retrospectives in 2 years, you know, they aren't taking any notice of the authority at all. And on the one hand, you could paint those silos a dark green, same as the woodwork round the other area, which they wouldn't stand out half as much as they do as a plain tin sheet silo like they are. I'm still mindful as to which way you go, but you know, like you say, it would have been better if they'd come to the authority and said, look, you know, this is what you should do. You don't just do it and then expect planning permission to go ahead because you've already done it. And that's my opinion, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Colin. Heather?
Thank you. Well, I'm really going to go back to what David said, David Jeffers said. I mean, I think it is a success story, and whilst I accept that they haven't gone down the right process, I mean, we're all aware that this happens on a regular basis. If we look at on some of the lists that we looked at previously, you know, the list on here, you know, a lot of it, enforcement turns into people going for planning permission, which is often granted, not always, but it's considered to be granted. So I accept that they should have come back to us, but I think what's on the table is on the table. And you know, I don't think we should be sat here like schoolmasters giving detention, in the sense they should have got the message, and I fully support the officer's recommendation. Have we got a proposal on the table, Chair, or not? Okay, well, I propose that we should accept the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Have we any other speakers? No? Right, well, therefore, we'll go to the vote. We have a proposer for acceptance and a seconder. So it's Heather and David Jeffels, second. All in favour, please show.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That's carried.
Against?
2 against.
Any abstentions? I don't think there was. No. Right, thank you. That one's been passed. Thank you very much. Right, we'll go on to application number 2, which is demolition of a twin garage and construction of one principal residence dwelling with parking. And this is at Thorpe Cottage, Thornley Dale. And it's Emily.
Thanks, Chair. Good morning, members. So the application site, it lies within the centre of the Thornley Dale Conservation Area. So it relates to this residential dwelling here known as Thorpe Cottage, which fronts onto the A170, which runs here. It's bounded to both the east and the west by listed buildings, so the most relevant being to the east, there's a row of listed almshouses here. It's slightly unique in that vehicular access is accessed around the rear, so Brook Lane. There's a double bay garage here, which is attached to an entirely separate property known as Shaw's Cottage, but it actually serves the property outlined in blue. So the application seeks permission to demolish this double bay garage, which is up here, in order to construct a principal residence dwelling, 3 bedrooms, as well as a replacement garage to then serve Thorpe Cottage. So it's been brought to members due to the number of third-party objections, as well as an objection from the parish council. So we do have a speaker on this one.
Right, thank you. Yes, we have one speaker against the application, and that's Mrs. Campbell. Thank you very much. You have 3 minutes from when you start speaking. Oh.
Thank you. You've done that before. Right. Good morning. My name is Jackie Campbell. I live at Longmeadow, directly opposite this proposal. I am objecting on behalf of all the residents of Brook Lane, who without exception have grave concern about the scale and form of this proposed carbuncle. In particular, I represent Hazel Flinton and myself as the 2 properties most affected by this application. The existing garages have mellowed into the environment and have a low impact. Something inappropriate forced into the street stream will always be a monument to developers' greed. This is an overly tall building that does not fit. The actual design is a response to site constraints, not local character, and appears incongruous within the street. The almshouses are listed buildings. The properties around Thorpe Cottage are all listed. The curtilages on all sides of this proposal are listed and with a conservation area. This proposal affects all of these buildings. The proposal erodes the open setting that contributes to the significance of the listed buildings. The North Yorkshire Moors National Park was established to conserve our environment, and I understood that conservation in a conservation area should take priority over inappropriate development. The proposal delivers no meaningful public benefit capable of outweighing heritage harm. With a creative interpretation of turning areas and a disregard to the neighbour in Brook Cottage, the proposal just manages to allow parking for Thorpe Cottage, just. But for this new building, no study has been made, no concern for my front door and living room window 5 metres across Brook Lane. The cobble strip that is my front access must be used by any vehicle attempting tandem parking, all the while shining headlights straight into my living room. For safety, subject to you good people approving, I will need to install bollards in front of my property for my own safety. Tandem parking is all well, but where will the other tandem vehicle be parked during these manoeuvres? Brook Lane is a forbidden parking lane for most of the year. Is that to change to accommodate the shuffling of cars? The layout demonstratively fails basic highway safety requirements and relies on manoeuvres that introduce conflict and risk. I would like to show this graphic. It is a sketch, perspective 2 from the applicant. This bedroom window is less than 12 metres from my bedroom window. 12 metres unobscured, openable, looking straight into my bedroom. There is a fundamental harm to my privacy from the scale and proximity to my living space. There is an expired permission on the site to convert the existing garage into an associated dwelling, single story with a mezzanine. No one objected, as that was an appropriate development. The applicant's parents had due regard for their environment and neighbours. This proposal can best be summarised as a full-sized house into a half-sized plot. Thank you.
Back to Emily. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Chair. So in terms of the principle of housing on the site, so there has been 3 historical permissions for residential development on this particular site. None of these have been constructed, so we have to consider it under our current local plan, which would fall under policy C07, which is our housing in larger villages policy. So this policy seeks to permit principal residence dwellings in the main built-up area of villages where they meet the need for smaller dwellings. So because this is a 3-bedroom dwelling and it's in the main built-up area, we consider this to be a suitable site under this policy. In terms of design, you can see that it takes on a linear barn-like form, so it fits well within the site, it's felt to fit comfortably within the site. It's got a 2-storey offshoot here, and this is felt to be quite in keeping with the character of Brook Lane, which is a bit of a back lane in terms of character. It's got various barns as well as more typical residential dwellings, and then you've got a single bay garage down here, both of which are of stone and pan-tile construction. So just to help members understand what's going on, there's kind of 2 elements. In the yellow, you've got the new garage and essentially access for Thorpe Cottage, which fronts onto A170. And then in the blue, you've got the new dwelling, the parking area, and then the garden area. So there's kind of 2 separate things to consider as part of the proposal. So just for reference, here are some photos of the existing street scene. So here are some existing barns which exist down Brook Lane. So you can see that there are some more typical residential dwellings, and then they're kind of disrupted by barns. And then on the bottom right here, this is actually a dwelling that we approved in 2010 called Potter's Barn, and it actually takes on a very similar form to the dwelling before members today. So this plan will hopefully just help to explain the context a little bit better. So I've outlined any existing barns whose gables front onto Brook Lane in yellow, and then the development site in red, just to give you a feel of how it would essentially sit within the plot and that particular context. So just quickly, on the ground floor, you've got the living room, the kitchen area, and then at first floor level, you've got the 3 bedrooms and then the bathroom. So looking at the elevations, you've got a fairly simple gable elevation which would front onto Brook Lane. This is felt to be in keeping with other barns. So this one's called the Old Schoolyard. That's an existing building. So it's felt to be in keeping with that particular street scene character. The majority of the fenestration is focused on this eastern elevation down here. So it's got a fairly informal layout, which is more typical of barns rather than sort of residential dwellings, which are more symmetrical in terms of appearance. And then I'm not sure whether you can see, but there's actually a dotted blue line here and here, which show the amendments. So originally it was much taller. They've dropped it in height, so it sits below both neighbouring dwellings, and then they've reduced it in about 1/4 in length as well, so it sits more comfortably within the site. So again, you've got a fairly simple elevation to the west. There's not many windows there on that. And then a fairly simple elevation at the rear as well. So here are some visualizations of how it would be expected to look in the street scene. So we have negotiated this area of hard standing here to be grassed over, which we consider to be an enhancement to the street scene. There's currently areas of grass verges down Brook Lane, but this is currently an area of hard standing. So by introducing this, it softens up the street scene nicely. And then this is essentially looking into the proposed dwelling from the rear. So in terms of the impact to the conservation area and the adjacent listed buildings, because they are designated heritage assets, we do need to weigh any harm to these assets against the public benefits of the proposal under the National Planning Policy Framework. So we've accepted that this is a historic structure. It's been on site since the 19th century. However, it's seen some fairly modern interventions by way of the double garage doors, and it's not felt to contribute particularly positively to the street scene. So therefore, its loss, when balanced against the gain of a new dwelling, as well as the grassing over of that verge at the front, is felt to be acceptable. And then going on to the impact of the almshouses. So this photo is taken from the rear of the almshouses. So the garage building would sit here. So in terms of impact, we've had the garage building reduced in scale. It was originally came in as a double bay. It's now a single bay, and it's also been reorientated. So as you can see, there's a reasonable degree of separation between the actual almshouses themselves and the development site. So it's not felt that the development particularly impact the setting of the listed almshouses. Oops. So in terms of amenity, this is where the most objections sort of centre around in terms of overshadowing and overlooking. So in terms of overlooking, as I've mentioned, the majority of the fenestration is on this elevation here. It's in a staggered arrangement from that of Shaw's cottage, which has, I think, around 2 windows, and they're in a staggered arrangement to the proposed dwelling. And then on this elevation, you've got, I think, 1 window which actually fronts onto Brook Cottage, but there are no windows on Brook Cottage's gable elevation. And then, as we've just heard, there is an objection in relation to the gable window, which would look onto Long Meadow to the north. However, we've considered that there's a precedent for properties facing one another already down Brook Lane, and it's a reasonable distance of 12 metres away. And also looking at plans, so the gable window would be directly central on the dwelling, and that would be, again, in a staggered formation to the windows of Long Meadow, which sit around here and here. So again, it's not felt to have an adverse impact in terms of overlooking. Overshadowing wise, you would get some overshadowing naturally just as a result of the development. This would be to the west in the morning. However, again, no windows on that particular gable. Then to the north, you would have it on the actual street itself, so no impact there. And then in terms of Shaw's cottage, you would have some overshadowing in the early evening, but this would be limited to around here, and it's not felt to impact on the principal amenity areas of that particular dwelling. So again, it's not felt to have an adverse impact in terms of neighbouring amenity. I will just refer members to the update sheet where there's some additional comments in terms of the new sort of access here, as well as the garage building. And then finally, so there are no objections from the local highways authority. They've accepted that this access here, there will be some shuffling in order to be able to exit the site in a forward gear. And then they've accepted that here you would need to reverse out and park essentially in a tandem arrangement. But because it's a fairly low density traffic area, it's not anticipated to have an adverse impact on highway safety. So just looking quickly at some pictures. So this is a view looking down Brook Lane. This is the garage in question, so your new dwelling would essentially sit here. And then this is from within the site, so you've got the almshouses here at the rear. And then this is looking the other way on, so you've got the garage building here, and then I believe this one is Brook Cottage. So in view of all that, approval is recommended.
Right, thank you, Emily. Members, do any questions? Heather?
Thank you. Can we go back to the picture showing the lane and that's it. Can we get yes that one? Can you? Is that a white car? Is that? It's on street parking. There isn't on street parking on there, is there? What's that white? Is that a white car? I'm not great.
Yeah. So this is currently.
Can you get any closer up on that? Sorry, is it possible? Yeah. Okay. Oh, that's yeah. Well,
so there's currently an area of hard standing, and then the double garage serves that property on the A1.
It did seem as though it was on the side of the road there. Sorry, but that is the car. It seems to be the same. Yeah, thanks for that. What about lighting? What is it going to be lighting around the background? This garage is going to be. Is there any lighting there?
So in terms of lighting, I believe we have conditions.
Sorry, I was looking for it. Sorry, I probably should have done it better, but.
I believe we've conditioned no uplighting to be installed. So in terms of that, we just mean it needs to be dark skies friendly.
So where the garage is, there's not going to be any lights. I would imagine it'd have to be, otherwise it might.
We haven't got details of the exact positions, but if members did want that condition.
Well, I mean, obviously, yeah,
details to be provided.
Well, obviously, it's the effect on the neighbouring properties, isn't it? I mean, that I can imagine there will have to be something there, but that's quite good for security, but not necessarily for somebody going to somebody's window. So perhaps look at that. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. Malcolm?
Yeah, thank you. I'm just want to be clear about kind of who owns what. Can you just go back to the blues and the yellows and things? And, sorry. Yeah, that's first.
There you go. So the yellow would essentially serve the property which fronts onto the A170, so Fort Cottage. So they'd essentially get a new access down sort of the left-hand side on the plans, and then the garage building would then replace the garage which is to be demolished. So that would serve Fort Cottage. And everything in the blue would essentially serve the new dwelling. So that's obviously the linear dwelling. Then there's the driveway to the right hand side, to the west, to the east even, and then the garage, the garden area.
Yeah. So that's all within the owners, within applicant's ownership.
Yes. So it's probably more helpful to see on the location plan. So the blue is within the applicant's ownership, and then the red is the actual development site. So all of that line. So the people at the adjacent cottage don't own. No, they don't. So it's a unique arrangement in that the adjacent cottage doesn't own the garage.
Yeah. I'm wondering whether it's worth going to look at it. I must admit. I'll pause there before saying anything else. Certainly unique.
I have an observation, a comment, and a question. So may I take them in that order? The observation, I'm sorry, Emily, I don't find that helpful at all, the detail in there. I can't see it. You can't see the code. It's not in the papers. You can't see what you're looking at. What we've just looked at to see where things are, not in the least bit helpful. You are. You've helped my understanding by talking through it. But had you not been there, that does not mean anything. What members of the public get from that? You're here, you're talking through it. It's too hard to see so that's the observation. And I've never noticed this before, Chairman, otherwise I think you'd find I might have said it before. But so thank you. It's just to note that it's really actually quite difficult to understand what's going on there. My comment is that this site has a lot of planning history, isn't it? So this isn't the first time a planning application's been, so we've looked at that and we've considered this, and on occasions in the past we've made approvals. The question I have is, and is there an approved distance between the point that our speaker made about the intrusion from the window to her residential window, the 12 metres? Is there a limit? Is that pushing the limit, or how? I'm not sure about that.
There's not a hard and fast regulation, so planners use sort of what's called rule of thumb, and that's about anything less than 11 metres is, if it's a direct window to window, and depending on what the rooms are, if they're bedrooms, for example, or living rooms, that would be considered to be unacceptable overlooking. So I think this is just at the limit. I think the case officer said it's not direct, it's oblique. But mostly on a road, you've got houses facing each other anyway. So there is obviously an element of that. I just feel that this is a classic case where members are not very clear from the presentation. There's a few issues here that I think would really benefit from actually going on that site and looking at, and that potentially is one of them, and potentially the parking arrangement and the garage arrangement is another. I think from an officer's point of view, Emily's really well explained that the design of this is in keeping actually, because there's a whole rhythm of barn-like buildings on that road at that angle, and it would really fit in with that design. And the fact that we've considered that to be an infill plot previously by giving approvals. So it's getting the detail right. The members are not clear from the detail from the presentation. That's why you have a site visit procedure.
Okay.
John. Thanks, Chair. And that's exactly what I was going to suggest. Given the comments that I think Malcolm, you were hinting towards, that you'd like to have a look at the site, and I too. I thought it was an excellent presentation, Emily, and but it highlighted for me the complicated nature of that whole block of developments. I certainly think we would benefit from a site visit to understand in greater detail the impact that this building is going to have. So I suggest that we do go on a site visit.
Right, thank you. Well, before we go on any further, David, we have got a proposer, which was Malcolm, and a seconder, which was John, for a site visit. All in favour of a site visit, please show.
And Chair, that is to actually look at on site those issues of potential overlooking and the arrangements for car parking and access, and the relationship between this and the other dwellings.
David, did you want to say anything now, or do you wait until that? Right, thank you very much. Okay, that one's been deferred for a site visit, so we'll just come back next time for that one. Thank you very much. Okay, application number 3, which is installation of replacement UPVC windows at the Plough Fadmore. And it's Hilary again. Thank you, Hilary.
Right, thanks, Chair. So this application relates to the ploughing in Fadmore, which members may well be aware of because there's been a lot of publicity over it in recent months. So it's a pub that's been empty for a number of years and was eventually purchased by a local community group to be run as a community pub. The pub itself has been empty for over 10 years and is in quite a poor state of repairs. There's a lot of work going on at the moment in terms of renovations. So this application relates to replacement windows. We've had no objections to the application. We've had one letter of support. It's come before members because one of the officers of the authority is heavily involved in the community group undertaking all the works to the building. So it doesn't fall within the scheme delegation. So the application is to replace all of the windows in the pub. The windows that are in there at the moment are thought to have been put in the 70s. Casement windows, they've all found to be rotten and needed replacement. This application is to replace them with UPVC windows rather than timber, but they would be flush fitting, good quality flush fitting casement windows without visible trickle vents, of a simpler design, which going through sort of historical imagery have been in the past. So sorry, this is just showing the rear elevation and the works that are being undertaken at the moment. The windows were boarded up for many years and have recently been reopened. So in terms of the windows to replace, it's all of this element here. So all the windows in the building are in need of replacement, and the proposal is for windows such as these. These are samples that have been provided with the application. So flush fitting, sort of a grey-green colour, just with a simple glazing bar rather than the sort of multiple glazing bars at the moment. But as I say, previous records show a selection of window types over the years. This is the building many years ago before it sort of ran into current disrepair. And then we've got a historical photograph here showing the windows previously, which were just the simple casement windows. So, as we heard earlier in terms of the appeal decision for windows in a barn conversion, we do look very carefully at proposals for UPVC windows on traditional buildings. This pub itself, it's not a listed building, and it's not within the conservation area. Whilst timber windows in the past may well have been considered the preferable option, we need to look at whether there would be actually any harm to this historic building which isn't listed or in a conservation area in terms of installing new PVC windows. You can see from the recommendation is for approval on the basis that we can condition the type of windows, we can ensure there are no external trickle vents, and that they're flush fitting casements, and it's felt that windows of the quality proposed would not be harmful to the character of the building, and is a pragmatic way forward to ensure that this important building is brought back into use to serve the community. So approval is recommended. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Any questions? No?
Can I give it, can I give an approval, Mr. Chairman? It's a long-running saga that we've gone through for a very long time. I'm sure we'll want to support now.
Right. Have we a seconder? David? Right, thank you. Okay, we'll go straight to the vote because we've got a proposal which was David and a second which was David. All in favour, please show.
3, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's unanimous.
Right, thank you. That must be it. Right, that's the end of the meeting. Thank you very much. Chris, right. I'm just going to bring Chris in now.
Just members, you always want a little bit of extra information, but it's very brief. Just want to introduce you to Jessica, if you've not met Jessica before. Jess Taylor's our new senior